It might sound kind of kitsch to think of a tree like an antenna, but the way I see them and have come to understand them through diets is that they're supporting a bioweb around the earth, almost like the World Wide Web symbol, of this web in a sphere that wraps the earth. And they support like a sky net, and all of our resonance is also connecting and supporting that sky net as well, like the biomagnetic resonance of our heart and our mental field, as well as all of the other animals and rocks and minerals and weather patterns, right? It's a connected, nested intermingling of natural systems. But there's something that happens with trees because they're such master regulators of the Earth's weather patterns and movements of water and heat, and that they can also talk and call people.
Jordan, welcome to Cura Medicina.
Thank you, Derek. Good to be here, brother.
Yeah, good to be here with you. And quick prayer for all the trees. Thank you, trees, for all the guidance and for your beautiful teachings. And may we give this conversation reverence to those beautiful beings. Yeah. And before we got on the call, I was telling you a little bit about my connection to Noya Rao and how excited I am to speak to you about all the knowledge you're bringing into this world and sharing with people. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey of getting here, first, before we dive into all your deep knowledge. People always are interested how we come to this path, So, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you for the invitation to share. Little bit about my journey. I left the US when I was really young. Relatively speaking, I was 19, and I moved to China, and I spent 7 years in Beijing. And during that time, I lived full-time as an artist. I opened a recording studio and began to compose and produce and create. But at the same time, I was drinking like a extremely poisonous level of alcohol, and was beginning to use narcotics as well at a level that was in overdose territory, very much in the red zone. And so that went on pretty intensely for about 4 years straight. And towards the end of that run with substances, I had a massive crash. My art career was going exponential, but my physical and mental and spiritual well-being was tanking. And so I moved to LA to try and reground myself in the States. And just before going back to LA, I was at home in Florida, which is where I'm from. And someone introduced me to an Apache medicine man named Iron Eagle, who became my mentor. And I sat in my first ceremony and, connected to the medicine, and went to LA, thought I was going to, weave into the music industry, and kind of ended up living a 3-year-long monastic existence in LA while I started to heal. And did a lot of fasting, did like a month-long fast, and started learning bone setting and learning how to work on my organs from inside. It was a very deep and interesting time of studying some of the Taoist techniques that I learned in China, but for serious self-healing work. And I continued to sit in grandmother ceremonies with a Kokama medicine man who would travel from Peru to Malibu, and eventually healed up enough and felt called to go, jump in the jungle. So I packed everything up in LA and started dieting in Peru in a Kokama tradition. And very quickly, dieting in Peru, I began to remember something about tobacco. And it's challenging to describe because it was like a full flood level of memory and knowledge that woke up all at once. But my grandmother gifted me a set of tobacco pipes when I was about 15, and I took to them very fast. So when I was, you know, I kind of had just passed through puberty, I started taking, these pipes to the local pipe shops in Florida and connecting to pipe smokers and elders and learning pipe technique and learning about the selection of pipe tobaccos that you could find and acquire. Which, of course, they're not medicinal shamanic tobaccos, but there's a very deep appreciation for the power and the potency of the spirit of tobacco amongst the pipe smoking community. And I don't know, so I had been smoking a pipe by the time I made it to the jungle for about 15 years. And when I got to the jungle and smelled the mapacho in the jungle during a grandmother ceremony, it was almost like 15 years of pipe smoking kind of activated and came online. And I just remembered something about the place of tobacco within the shamanic order. And I didn't find the medicine that I needed to heal dieting in Peru. I was trying to heal an intestinal condition um, from weakening myself from all of the self abuse in China. And I was very called to this desert shrub called ocotillo, which is in the Sonoran Desert and the Chihuahuan Desert. And so I ended up going to southern Arizona. And over the course of a few years, I went in and out of the desert, took a tobacco pipe, and started dieting ocotillo. And it was hard, and I made a bunch of mistakes, but I had I had this Apache elder who kept checking me and who kept, I never sat, I sat in one, it was my first ceremony. I never sat in another ceremony with him, but for about 7 years, he checked my work. And, so I self-led my diets, and then I would go back to this elder, and he just, I guess, made sure I was growing in a way that was straight. And so my way of beginning to nurture and connect to the diet in the wilderness was through the tobacco pipe, and I guess to a decade and a half of experience smoking it, and that started to lead to other trees through dreams. And I actually remember when I had come out of the Sonoran Desert for the first time after dieting ocotillo, which is a big shrub. I mean, it's a very thorny shrub, but it's used for the lymphatic system and for the area between the hips, whether that's the womb or the intestines or the hip tissue. And I started dreaming of the white birch. I didn't know the white birch. I'm from Florida. White birch doesn't grow in Florida. It doesn't grow in the southern latitudes. And I had a dream of white birch in Vancouver Island. And so this was during COVID in 2020. I got in my Land Cruiser and I drove to Canada. And I couldn't get across the border because they had closed it. But in seeking the white birch, I was kind of stranded in Oregon, waiting at a friend's house for the border to open up. I was there for 2 months. Somebody introduced me to one of the other trees we now work with, which is called metasequoia, and it's the eldest of the sequoia family and is one of the oldest trees species alive on Earth. So something evolved something like 300 million years ago. And I dieted that tree for a few weeks out in the Oregon wilderness, and she gave me more pieces around tobacco and how tobacco works with the trees. And so likewise, for about 5 years, I just spirit walked and pieced myself back together with the diets and listening to the waypoints of the trees. I did end up finding white birch on the other coast, in upstate New York near the Canadian border. And we're about to drive. It's a Saturday, August 1st. I'm in Wales in England right now, and we're about to drop into white birch diets on Monday, silver birch over here. Um, but there are a few trees from that period of spirit walking and restitching myself together physically and mentally and spiritually that have become very, very deep allies that we now serve and work with all over the world. And we work with tobacco and white birch or silver birch, oaks, and the metasequoia.
Beautiful, brother. Couple questions. Was the teacher Don William, the Kokama teacher?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm also connected to Don Williams, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, great guy. Neela too, love her. And so, I mean, it's quite interesting your journey, right? Because you started working with teachers, and then you started an individual path, right? Which is not very common. At what stage in that did your destructive behaviors that you were mixed up with in China, did they drop off? Was it kind of a slow, a slow cook, or was there a realization you had at some point and you were like, I can't live like this anymore? And yeah, I'm just curious about that piece.
No, it stopped pretty hardcore when I was in LA. And so that first grandmother ceremony that I had in Florida, I think I spent about 2.5 years integrating that. And I didn't touch medicine again. I didn't even really think about it, to be honest. I was not thinking about medicine or the medicine path. I had never been to the jungle. I, before being brought to that ceremony, I didn't even know what the medicine was. And I really had no concept of it. So that sitting in that ceremony opened me to something very strong. But afterwards, I wasn't thinking about medicine. I was thinking about how to heal my body. And so I was more focused on fasting, breathing, and working on my physicality. And so I did that for 2.5 years. And in that period, managed to clear out like 85% of the destructive behavior. And then over the course of 5 years of dieting, plucked most of the rest out. And I'm probably still pulling about 2% of it out, you know?
Beautiful. That's a great journey, my brother. And so as we move into talking about the trees, maybe explain what exactly is a tree diet.
Well, as I understand it, it's a traditional spiritual discipline that enables an individual to access the full spectrum medicine within a tree, which is physical at the gross level, right? So it does work on your bones, it does work on your marrow, it works on your joints, it works on your ligaments, it works on your tendons and connective tissue and fascia, and it works on the tissue of your organs. Trees are very physical, they have very physical medicine, but their etheric qualities or their spiritual qualities are also very strong. And those qualities can be invoked in a tree diet. And so the tree can be permissioned or invited to work on the subtle aspects of the person, which could include anything like our psyche or our ego. The tree can work on our emotional body. The tree can work on our, what we might say is our connection to karma or connection to the web of life, connection to, or you might say, our relational field, the way that we understand our relationships. The trees can work on belief systems. They can work on ideas that we have. In the West, we might think that the mind or thought is something abstract and has no substrate, that the mind is kind of eternal. But the trees can actually engage the apparatus of our belief mechanisms and begin to massage them, almost like you're getting a chiropractic adjustment. And so they work on this whole spectrum. I mean, a really deep tree diet can work on your soul and can begin to invoke aspects of your nature that seem to go beyond the physical body and beyond identity, right? And those are profound. Those experiences can be just utterly frightening and profound and initiatory to be met at the level of soul and kind of looked at the level of soul. Um, but you know, from another lens, what is a tree diet? It's a minimum of a week in many traditions, a minimum of 8 days. Some traditions, it's a minimum of 10 days, but offline, completely isolated in a sense, where you're not in communication with the outside world and you're refraining from eating certain foods that could overstimulate you, and you're cleaning yourself out to come to a very downregulated baseline of sensitivity where you can receive the subtlety that could come through the connection to uh, a teacher tree.
Yeah, and that's an interesting distinction because a lot of people they think that plants and trees are herbal medicine, which they are, but the way you're describing it, it's an intelligent teacher, right? It's something more than just ingesting it for your physical body, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a few different ways to look at that. I mean, following the herbal thread, one of the things that I like to say is it's very possible to do a diet without drinking anything, right? Without putting anything in your body. So you don't have to drink a tree to do a diet of tree, um, which maybe for the Western mind of scientific materialism, that goes, huh, well, that's interesting. Then what is it really? And the way that I understand it ceremonially or ritually is that when you open up a diet with a tree, you're opening up a connection through the field, right? Through the unified field or through the biomagnetic field. And you're inviting the energy of that tree to enter you through the biomagnetic field. And that is happening when you drink the tea, but you could do that without drinking the tea. And by the tea, I mean a traditional tree diet usually involves drinking bark tea, inner bark tea from a teacher tree, though it could be some other form, like a fruit of the tree. It could be roots of the tree, but typically it's the inner bark. And so you are drinking the herbal substrate into your physical system most of the time. But even that, when that's happening in a tree diet, that's not where the power is coming from in the tree diet. It's coming from the connection to the tree through the tea that opens you up to connecting through the field. So you could skip the tea and connect through the field if you had that kind of sensitivity already built. But you get so much physical benefit from drinking bark tea from these master plants. The other side of it is that I think it begs the question of what is healing. And from what I've experienced in the indigenous perspective and what I've experienced from diets in the wilderness is that healing has to do with getting to the root of what choice was created, what choice was made that created imbalance in the first place. And in the West, we often think of healing as a technical solution to a userless problem, like that it wasn't will that created the problem. It was it arose out of the chaos, and no one is responsible for the problem. And so we create solutions to these problems that are also disembodied or abstract. But that doesn't get to the heart of human choice and human will and our creative agency. And I think the way that the master plants work is by connecting us back to our agency as evolving creative beings and saying, what have you chosen that has caused you to fall really far out of balance, and that has now caused that feedback mechanism of pain? And how do you work your way back through that to get back to sovereign choice and then reconstruct or grow from that awareness or that full loop of learning when you come all the way back? And then there's healing in that.
Yeah, I love that description. I'm wondering, you said that the the original tree or the calling of the trees came from a dream that you had, or maybe the deepening came from a dream. And if somebody's listening to this and wondering about how the trees communicate with us, we have one example of a dream, but can you talk a little bit about that? What that communication is like, and how one knows intrinsically that it's not their imagination, but it's actually an intelligence that's informing the conversation and the teachings.
I think it goes back to what I was sharing with the concept of the field, that we live in a electromagnetic field or the unified field. I mean, and it's not it's not a controversial idea, but taking applied physics and thinking about it in our day-to-day life, that's maybe a bit of an abstract leap. But dreams are not self-contained within our own psyche. And maybe that's a distinction. That's something that Western psychology would say your dreams are the result of your individuated process attempting to understand the events of your own inner experience. And so if you have a dream about a tree, it's because you have had some interaction with a tree, or you saw a tree, or there's a tree symbolism, and somehow it's trying to work something out within you. Whereas the indigenous or the animistic vision, or even potentially, I would say, where physics is going, which begs a different question. These things may be merging, but physics would say something like, no, we're actually not self-contained, that we're open to a massive shared field or a web or a fabric or a mesh. And so everything's communicating together. And trees are masters of that web, as I understand it, and they prop up part of that web on Earth. It might sound kind of kitsch to think of a tree like an antenna, but the way I see them and have come to understand them through diets is that they're supporting a bioweb around the Earth, almost like the World Wide Web symbol, of this web in a sphere that wraps the Earth. And they support like a sky net. And all of our resonance is also connecting and supporting that sky net as well, like the biomagnetic resonance of our heart and our mental field, as well as all of the other animals and rocks and minerals and weather patterns, right? It's a connected, nested intermingling of natural systems. But there's something that happens with trees because they're such master regulators of the Earth's weather patterns and movements of water and heat, and that they can also talk and call people. And, getting to that point in your inquiry there of, well, how do you know the difference between imagination and like true connection? I don't even want to call it psychic connection, but we'll say something like embodied knowing. It comes through self-knowing and self-knowledge about what is my signal, or what is my baseline state, and what is pinging or coming from outside of me. And that takes time to mature. And I don't know another way to say it. We all have it innately, but it takes time to uncover, and it takes time to mature and clarify.
Yeah. And this medicine work really helps in that path. If you commit yourself to it, you become more and more of a channel for that frequency to open up and to connect. Let's walk me through the three: white birch, live oak, and metasequoia, and talk about maybe their characteristics, how they're different, why one would choose one over the other, or why you would choose that for the participant if you're the one that's probably assigning the tree. Yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, at first I didn't know why. I just knew that it needed to be that. Um, and I spent time dieting with a wide range of trees and other medicinal plants, but it was, I guess I hit a point in my path where I had a kind of inner gnosis. It was a knowing. It was a moment as well where I just knew this is what I serve now. And maybe that was because of the relationship that I had with these trees, but I think it was deeper than that. And later I discovered that the trees of old Europe, from Western Europe all the way to Northern Europe. So you think of the Western Celtic nations like France and England and Ireland and parts of Germany and parts of Denmark, and that these places worked with the duality of the birch and the oak. And so that's kind of the Celtic nations. Then you go north into the Germanic nations, like the Norse tribes, right? From Germany all the way through Sweden and Finland and Norway, and even into some of the Latvia and Estonia, Lithuania. And they worked with the same combination, the same pairing of birch and oak. Then you go further into the Slavic countries, further east in Europe, and you realize they have the same thing. Then you go even further into the central plains of Central Asia, and you realize they have the same thing. And you go into Central Siberia, and you realize they have the same thing. And then you go all the way through Korea and Japan, and it's there too. It gets a little bit different in terms of their pantheon once you hit Japan, but still a memory of the birch oak pairing there. Both trees are there. It's a little bit brighter in Korea because their language is connected to Central Siberian languages, which is also Apache and Navajo, the same linguistic family that spread out across the connection between Russia and Alaska and down into the Americas. Um, but the same pairing is there through Alaska, Canada, and the northern part of the United States. And I don't know if we've been able to track the same type of mythological pairing because those stories were so oral. But there is a very clear map across all of Europe. I mean, it goes down into Portugal. And then in Central Asia, it goes down into Iran, Turkey. It's it's all the way into Syria, if I'm not mistaken. And it goes down through India. It's in the Himalayas. And so I don't know what that is. I wish I could tell you. I don't know what that is. But the evidence of the power and the ancient pairing in the northern lineages of these two trees is beyond overwhelming. It's so pervasive and intense. It's kind of incredible that we've forgotten it. But to clarify what that is and how I understand it and what I've seen there, the simple balancing of those two is that oak is the great father and birch is the great mother. And so you look at the pairings of those, you go, okay, oak, sky father, Yahweh, Thor, Zeus, Varuna, Indra, Perun. And you look at birch, and she's the great mother goddesses of old Europe. And there's some kind of primitive, probably pre-linguistic balance between these trees that where humans bonded with them, lived by them, and understood something in their native connection before we became what we think of as civilized. And it feels Neanderthal in a way, the kind of connections that are there. And so something is trying to come back in that. I don't know how else to say it because it feels like it's coming through rather than something I discovered and latched onto as an idea. And then the metasequoia is the eldest of the sequoia family, evolved in the Cretaceous period, late Jurassic period, at the North Pole. So the tree covered the North Pole when it was a swamp, and it was a bunch of clades or swamp marshlands that were connected in like a huge kind of tidal pool. And we know that we know that it was like that because the tree fossils are everywhere up there in the ice. So it's believed that the metasequoia was the dominant canopy tree at the North Pole in the Arctic Circle because her fossils are so pervasive. So we knew of the fossils, thought the tree went extinct because it was nowhere to be found on Earth. And I think the fossils we found out about the tree somewhere in the early 20th century, 1910s or something like that, by a Japanese scientist. And then in the 1940s, the tree was discovered growing in southern China. And so the tree had walked south from the Arctic Circle all down the Earth in every direction. So fossils are found all over North America, all over Europe. They're all over England and all over Asia. But the living example of the tree was found in a very small grove in southern China during World War II. And there was something like 40 of them alive, and they had been adorned and enshrined by the local villagers. And that tree was then cloned through its, it's kind of a seed pod that looks like a bit of a cone. And it was sent all over the world to botanical gardens and kind of as a gift. And it was seen as like a tree of peace because it came in this time of nuclear war. And since she's been cultivated everywhere, and we could go down a whole trek on the metasequoia and the mystery of the metasequoia that I am presently discovering. But now and again, every few months, she takes me on a run where she will, some people may find this very out there, but she will pull me off course of where I think I'm going or trying to go, whether that's I miss a turn or a flight is canceled. And she takes me to where she is growing. And I'll give you one quick one that happened literally a week ago. So last week we were in Denmark visiting my fiance's family. And this begins with her great aunt coming up to me at her grandfather's birthday. Never met her before. I'm meeting the whole family. And she comes up to me at this family gathering and says, "Hey, I have this group of old trees by my house. It's too bad you guys can't come visit me." And I said, "Well, maybe we can." And so we looked, and on our way out of Denmark, the day before we left Denmark to come back to England, we stopped by for an hour and had a tea and walked through this 11th century hermitage by her house. And very beautiful old oaks and very beautiful old birches. And there you go, right before we left, is a massive metasequoia tree. And, I'm getting chills even as I recount it. It's a very profound feeling for me because this tree is woven through my life. And so we leave that feeling elated. The next day we're in Copenhagen. We spent a night in Copenhagen. Next morning, 30 minutes before we go to the airport, I said, "Maria, let's go, grab a coffee. You wanted to go check out this cafe." So we walked to a cafe near our hotel. In front of the cafe and in front of a church, I counted 25 metasequoia trees. So somebody knew what they were and had planted them 40 years ago. Okay, we fly a few hours later, land in England. I pick up our car and we're driving to our next destination. It's getting a little bit dark out, but I can still see. We miss a turn. I get frustrated that I missed a turn driving. And Maria says, "Maybe you didn't miss a turn. Maybe everything's fine." And we go around a roundabout and there's 3 giant metasequoias. We get to our city that we're headed to, which was Liverpool. And as we're pulling into Liverpool, it's dark, but the city is illuminated. And we start passing a vista of metasequoias on both sides, driving through like a metasequoia tunnel. The next morning, we find metasequoias in another part of the city. And then the following day, at our next destination, which is another city in London, as we're pulling into the city, we pull up to three metasequoias. And and again, the tree went nearly extinct. So these came from botanical gardens that some gardener knew about and planted, but she's a rare tree not growing native anywhere anymore. So she pulls me into these places to find her somehow. And I could write a book. I could give you other tales like that of how far she has pulled me to come and find her. But the last thing I'll say about it, for anybody that knows the Chalice Well Garden in Glastonbury, the it's a it's a very old lineage held garden. It's kind of a mini Garden of Eden in Avalon in England, and it protects this ancient spring that is considered to be one of the deepest known springs on Earth. They don't know how deep it is. It's too deep to measure with LiDAR. And it's been tended for thousands of years, unbroken. And there's the oak and the birch on the dragon line, and then there is the metasequoia that was planted there by a gardener some 30 years ago. That's the best I got for you.
Amazing, dude. How do you tell the difference between a sequoia and a metasequoia?
Well, there's three types of sequoias. There is the coastal sequoia, which is the most common in California, and then in Oregon and Washington, and then there's the giant sequoia, right? And those are the ones that you could drive your car through, the really old ones that are just massive in girth. And then there's the metasequoia, or the dawn redwood, and she is their grandmama. So it's in the same family, and I think we found something like 20 plus different species of sequoia in terms of fossils that we've counted, but there's only three that are alive. There's the coastal redwood, there's the giant sequoia, and there's the dawn redwood or metasequoia. And she's
Really
smaller. She has a conical.
She's a little smaller.
She's smaller, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's still tall. I mean, I think it goes up to 150 feet, but she has a conical like shape, and she looks like hanging ferns. She's very ancient looking.
Because a block from me, someone has a sequoia in their yard. And I take this walk around the neighborhood quite often. And I was like, how did that sequoia get there? So I'm going to send you a picture later and you can tell me if,
please,
dude, that would be amazing if there were a metasequoia block from me.
Yeah. Please, because as I mentioned earlier, we give the diets in Ojai once a year, and the closest that I have encountered that I harvest from is in Los Angeles. So there's a number of them growing in LA at botanical gardens. The UCLA has a botanical garden. There's two very big ones in there. And then the Santa Barbara Botanical Gardens. It's a private botanical gardens in Santa Barbara. I can't remember the name. Very beautiful.
Yeah, I've been there. It's beautiful. Yeah.
There's one growing in there.
Nice, man. So let's now that we understand the trees, which is what a great description. They're all over the place. They've been paired. Let's look into each one and talk about why someone would diet, or what are we know the masculine and the feminine aspects, but yeah, just walk me through a little bit how you would pick one, or why one would be called to you, or if you're working with something, what are the things that people are working with inside why they would work with one or the other. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So the oak, we'll start with the oak. The way that I see the oak medicine, and I'll reference it kind of with mini journeys per se, based on what we talked about earlier, that the teacher trees heal by guiding you through a sequence of self-reclamation rather than just kind of giving you a cure. The oak calls you back to authority. And that's acknowledgement of authority, whether that's it's both authority within yourself, but authority is a field, right? So it's nothing about you or others. It's about the field of authority. And that's the field of initiation and what's been earned through life and what's been earned through embodiment. And so when you're standing in authority, you're aware of what you don't have authority on or over, right? And so you're humble and you say, I don't have authority there. I haven't lived that enough. And so the oak brings you to that kind of awareness. And then also what you do have authority on and what you have lived. And so there's this adjustment process of your almost like your cognitive frame on who you are and what your power should be oriented towards and what you should channel your will towards. And in that way, the oak can help make really subtle adjustments to your, I don't want to say direction, it's almost to your self perception. And that can help you break through struggle. And so places where we've been using our power, where we don't have full authority, so we're pushing against a brick wall, beating our head against it because we're slightly out of alignment. The oak can help adjust that to where you go, okay, now I see what would be a correct or a judicious use of my own will or power, and you become more effective. And so the oak is very much a teacher of leadership in that way and what to do with power, where you put it, like how it should be routed inside of your life and inside of your life system. It's just absolutely extraordinary teacher. And one core way you might kind of wind that back down is that the oak helps you take responsibility where you're out of it. The birch is a very, very different medicine, though they work together. They're very symbiotic. The birch is a medicine of healing in the kind of traditional way that we think about healing. So if you have any kind of physical ailment, if anything is going on that's inflammatory, even if it's psychologically inflammatory, the birch is a master soother to the point where you might be able to touch self-regulation. Once you start to regulate a little bit through the birch medicine, she's very mysterious, but she can start coming through the cracks or the shadows in your emotional body and help you digest, I would say, almost what maybe we reject as indigestible. So kind of the great mother medicine in that way, that she has this solving power to break down or render what we would see as untouchable or unacceptable or insurmountable within ourselves. She has this ability to aid in alchemizing those things and also helping us regulate through the process of alchemy. And so she's a healing aid in that way. And when you get to deeper stages of birch diets, she's a teacher of alchemy. And she's a teacher of almost what constituents can be strung together in an ecosystem or a system to create alchemy. And in that way, she's a teacher of ritual as well. Absolutely profound. I mean, the traditional wisdom on the birch is she's either new beginnings and fertility, which is common all over the world because of her cycles and the way that she grows. And on the other hand, she's seen as a master purifier, an exorcist, a purger in a sense. It's not that her medicine makes you vomit in that sense. She's not purgative, but that she detoxifies you and cleans you out. And I have very much seen that from her. So anyone looking to clean, clear, heal, recapitulate, or reweave, alchemize, break down, birch can be a master medicine in that. The metasequoia is I sing to her a lot as a star medicine, and she's astral and ancient, and um, she has access to, I think, what many people would call the Akash, or the library, the natural library or the record system. And she remembers the stages of creation, and she remembers everybody, and she has access to the thing that remembers people's souls. And I have seen these waves of um, huge soul purges happen for every single person in the field during Metasequoidies, including myself. Even if once again, I'm not drinking the trees, but it's that shared field of transmission that gets so charged. And I've remembered past lives and past deeds and literal past identities. I've woken up with names before. She's such a powerhouse of memory. But in that way, I would say her core medicine is about vision. It's about long vision and understanding one's long path in this life and what our soul is doing here, and how to walk that pathway of our life's calling, or our soul's calling, with grace and with surrender. And I've seen her wake up people's personal medicine before. So for anybody that's seeking on the path and looking for lost aspects of the self, maybe what you call soul retrieval, um, or for soul reclamation, and for coming to one's purpose and one's medicine, the Metasequoia is a master, and in that way, she's a great teacher of spiritual maturity.
Yeah, I want to diet them all. So
Me
I
too.
can't figure. Yeah. When during my Know Your Rao diet, my teacher was like, okay, your dreams are going to be off the hook during this diet, most likely. And I was like, yeah, right. Whatever. And she was right. I have a whole book of my dreams during the diet. What role do dreams play in a tree diet?
It can be really strong, as you've just shared. The tobacco that we work with, we cook yearly in the Sacred Valley. We get the medicine from the jungle, and we have it sent up to Urubamba in the Sacred Valley of Peru in the Andes. And we cook the tobacco down into a paste every year. And um, that's the medicine that we take. Sometimes we take it in larger quantities and it causes a purge. Sometimes we take it in smaller quantities just to keep stimulating the diet. When you take it in smaller quantities for days on end, it stimulates such a lucid dreaming state, and it changes. It's very different than dieting with grandmother medicine, which you're in the field of that when you're dieting with the grandmother. When you're working with tobacco in a diet, it keeps you so sharp and lucid, but opens the dream as well. But the dream quality and characteristic can be quite different. For some people, their diets are full of dreams, and for some not. Some people just have very peaceful, deep, deep, deep spaces of rest. Um, I don't spend a lot of time overemphasizing the dreams, even though for me, they've been incredibly profound and impactful and important. And there are, you mentioned some other lineages that I know have inside diets work with the art of dream interpretation, because it can really help an individual have breakthrough. So I share a little bit of a methodology on how to work with dreams at the beginning of diets that has really helped me, and allow people to explore it on their own. But I find that something I try not to do is impose what might feel to me like wisdom on others during a diet. So I may add little sprinkles, but I err on the side of conservatism, and I allow people to have complete experience without my interjection.
Yeah, a great facilitator. Spoken like a great facilitator. Yeah, what kind of physical, emotional, or spiritual experiences do you see in the diet that people have? I'm sure it's all over the map, but do you see any commonality, or what can people expect? I have no expectation
Yeah,
is the best, I guess.
always. Yeah, I mean it's kind of like asking to describe like what happens on the inside of a circus. It's
Mm.
you
I
know
love that.
it's so vast inside of a jungle and inside of a forest. I mean, my experience is really, really different from, I think, the experience of many others, including what I have received from the trees and where I've gone.
Mm,
I mean, some of the things that I've experienced are direct, absolutely sheer direct psychic teaching
mm,
from trees, passing information and knowledge, which is challenging to integrate and hold. It's the kind of some of the traditional wisdom on that is that it's very easy to be poisoned by that because it's a lot for the mind to integrate and to know what to do with. But the trees can teach you directly and they can teach you psychically, meaning through direct transmission, where you simply open yourself and receive knowledge from them.
mm,
Um, they can teach through dreams, as you've shared. They a lot of the ways that they teach in the field that I facilitate is through somatic awareness, somatic healing, and somatic processing. And so I've been through a lot of physical reconstruction on my path, and they work maybe because of how much I've done in this. I think they do work on it in general, but because it's such a reality in my world, um, I see it a lot in the diets that we hold. They work on the tissue and very deep parts of the tissue. And so I watch people have full spinal awareness that can come online and a level of tissue awareness happening and breaking open that is um, kind of, you might say it's like extended perception into one's vessel. And that's a level of knowledge or awareness that can come through in a diet. Um, I've seen people go into almost like magnetic paralysis in a sense, where it seems like you're being held down with gravity while you're getting worked on. Um, I've seen people move through really, really profound levels of fear um, and overcoming, having the invitation to move through really deep fear states in the animal body. Um, I've seen people move through really profound levels of religious recoding at the I don't even want to say at the cellular level because that sounds too abstract, but at the level of the animal body or the fear body, the kind of conditioned body. And I've seen people radically break through in their life. I mean, that's the most important part. And I haven't,
mm.
it's not a guarantee, but I've seen that happen a number of times where it can't, if I do see it, it blows me away to watch somebody, take what we would call a quantum leap after a diet and rapidly evolve themselves and evolve their attitude on life. And in that evolution of their attitude, watch their life change. And that I, that I see a lot because the medicine's really, really powerful. And the way that we do our best to hold it is in a really integrated fashion. And so some of the things that we teach in the community are around how to do a simple daily root practice that helps you weave the medicine through your day to day life, but then also allows you to build capacity so that when you go back into a diet, you're primed to receive more.
Nice. Okay, let's shift to one of my favorite master plants of all time, grandfather tobacco, and
I,
talk about why why is tobacco a companion medicine with the tree diet process? And maybe for people out there, tobacco is such a like has so much baggage on it, from our society. Maybe talk a little bit about the difference between sacred tobacco and what most people think of as tobacco, and why it's such a great um, opener. Really, I call it like the master opener and communicator with other spirit. So I'd love to hear, yeah, what you have to say about that.
yeah, you ask me in the middle of a time where I'm in like incredibly deep contemplation right now around the story of tobacco and the kind of the colonial story. I'm in England, right? And England, the the relationship between England, the American colonies, and the growth of tobacco, both as a commodity in the world, but also as the fortunes, the monetary fortunes that began the United States. It's inextricable, right? It's the United States was founded on wealth generated from the transatlantic trade that was based on tobacco crops. And I mean, it's kind of a fascinating reality. So I've been thinking about this a lot, trying to take sacred tobacco apart from, colonized, commodified tobacco. I don't know if it's quite possible. Tobacco is a being, a plant, an alchemy, a guardian, a door, a spirit that holds an incredible amount of power. That power is neutral, and tobacco was utilized to generate a kind of world order and a next realm of a world order. And I don't know if that was done intentionally or not. But when you look at the history, and it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's not. It's so plain and simple. We just haven't framed it like that for ourselves. That the colonies, the first English colonies in the the prior to the U.S. being the U.S., they were tobacco colonies. The slave trade was based on those tobacco colonies, and all the fortunes of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence were tobacco fortunes. The first the first note, the first monetary note in those colonies was a tobacco note. So the first US dollar was a tobacco dollar, which it was that also for indigenous people. So there's a form of currency, a form of goodwill, which is that's what a
Mm-hmm.
currency is. So so you can't parse out what is sacred tobacco and what is not. It's there in the essence. We can kind of come to consciousness and understanding and respect of tobacco or the natural world. But that's this whole journey of cutting through colonialism and the history of what it is and coming back to honor. Um, I see tobacco as a king spirit. This is my understanding and relationship to tobacco in the sense that tobacco is a law abiding plant, and has a law within and it's not its own law. It's a law that tobacco remembers and follows. And so I see tobacco as, I would call it the tobacco law. And I would say that Sacred Tree Keepers and our community operates under the tobacco law. And that's what I teach. And that, that's what I try and live. And that there's a sense of order in that tobacco law, and that's also what holds down ceremonial order. And that's prime. This is my understanding of it. Once again, I think it would be communicated very differently by many, many, many people. But the way I see it is that's what tobacco is primarily doing in a grandmother's ceremony when you see it being smoked there. That yes, there's these connective aspects of tobacco as a diplomat, as you mentioned, to be able to connect to the spirit world. But first and foremost, tobacco is there to ensure the law and to create order between the spirit world and the realm of physical manifestation. But in simple terms, that looks like, do you honor your word? How do you show up? How do you stay consistent and coherent between what goes on behind closed doors and how you present yourself? How do you use your power of language and intelligence to manipulate? Do you shoot straight? Do you do clear deals? Are you trustworthy? Um, are you effective? Is what you're offering actual medicine? Is it helping people? Is it integrous in its full stack, root to crown? That's how I see tobacco, and that I really, I say this with my whole heart. That's tobacco's medicine for me. And there's so many ways to connect to tobacco, and the plant has many gifts. But I really feel its core teaching is come back as human beings to the law, the natural law, and the natural order of what helps things stay anchored, straight, and in coherence. And that's why we work with tobacco in shamanic spaces, because for it to be true, it needs to be coherent all the way through. And if you work with tobacco in that way, with that kind of prayer and acknowledgement for clarity and balance and coherence, that's what you can access. And then you need to do the requisite work in order to be able to hold that with the tobacco as an ally.
Well said, brother. Well said. Yeah. Do you believe that trees experience humans as individuals?
I think I want to say I know they do. Of course, that's not true, but I don't. Do I know? Not really. But I know that they do. Yeah, because and the reason that I know that is because they give me their individual names. I know the name of every oak that I've given a diet of around the world. And every time I meet an oak and speak to it and ask for its name, it will give me the name. And they have different names. This tree here and this tree 6 meters away has a different name. And they are individuals. And we say Noyoral and we say oak, just like we say man and woman. But there's also Derek and Jordan. And there's also Morke Miyok and Mezclepion. And they are both coast live oaks. And that's how I experienced them. And I don't think I'm the only one that feels that way, but to get to know them that way is overwhelming, and it breaks the colonial mind because we want to categorize things, right? We want to think of things in containable units that we can kind of file abstractly in our own system of meaning. And I remember when I first started connecting to that, it was overwhelming for me because I thought, oh my God, how am I going to understand this? And the beauty is I don't have to understand it. I never will understand it. And there's nothing to understand in that way. Just experience it. And can you go into deeper layers of experience of it? And in that, it requires you to meet things as they are directly in front of you, one at a time.
What do you think trees understand about life that we as humans have forgotten?
I think it's a bit of a simple one in how I look at it, but that life is about service, and that any kind of power that we gain, that is given for a purpose, and it's for service. It's to be given back. And so a benevolent king receives an enormous amount of power, but only if he gives it all back. And what that generates and creates is an enormous beauty. Like, it creates so much beauty, we can't even understand it. And that's flowers and trees, and it's the natural world generating all of the beauty, and bees and birds, and it's the system living in harmony. And I think trees retain that knowledge. One, that there is a natural law, like I was talking about with tobacco, and they abide by that natural law. And it's the same reason that you see, what do they call it? Crown shyness, where trees don't touch in the canopy. And you look up and there are all these trees and there are little lines of open space between where their top branches aren't touching because they leave space for one another. And you see the evidence. They follow natural law. And I genuinely believe that we got our concept of natural law from trees, that we got our concept of religious law from trees, that we got our concept of political law from trees. Um, but in that, that oriented around all of that is that life is about service, and that's it. Everything you have is to be given back.
I love that. I had never thought about that before. Before the podcast, I was sitting outside with some hape and looking up at the eucalyptus that I told you about, and I was thinking, the squirrels are up there, and it's providing for the birds, and it's giving me oxygen, and it's giving shade to the. I was thinking of all these things that the tree is doing, but I hadn't thought about that as service. And so I love that. Because when you think about it, the tree is offering all that to all the beings that are around it, just because it is what it is. It is its majesty. It is its beauty. It is, it is, yeah. Yeah. Has a tree ever taught you anything about death? Speaking of death, I had a tree in the backyard, and some guy came around and was taking out all the indigenous. He had some grant to take out all non-indigenous trees, which I disagree with personally. And I went away and I came back. It was such a beautiful tree, and he just chopped it down, I had a little ritual and for it, and I felt it so deeply, the ending of its life, just on a concept that it was, non-indigenous. I don't know what your view is on indigenous versus non-indigenous, but that tree had been there for years and years and years, and yeah, love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's happening here where we are too. There's a grant in Somerset County, which is where we're doing our work at the end of August. We have a master tree diet here at the end of August, and they're taking out all the non-native Norway spruce that were planted here as essentially wood harvest trees in the early 20th century. And there's many forests of Norway spruce, right? So they've become somewhat nativized. And we took a walk. One of the land stewards actually said, "Will you come walk through this forest? Because we're thinking about literally cutting down all of these Norway spruce, and I don't feel good about it." But there's a local incentive for it that pays us a certain amount of money, and she said many of the people on our board want to do it. So I said, okay. And ultimately I don't know the answer to that. I would have to spend a lot more time listening to even attempt to understand. But my first instinct was the same as you, which was no, leave them alone and let them be, and let the next generation sort it out, and let the next generation of trees sort it out in a way, the next generation of death and rebirth sort out how it wants to grow. And I guess if you had to make a rational argument for it, it would be something like no forest on earth is indigenous or native. They've all been introduced. I mean, a huge portion of the trees in North America come from Asia, and they probably got there through human interaction. Eucalyptus come from Australia, but they've been spread all over the world. And so are they saying the eucalyptus trees are indigenous to Ojai? That's not true. I reckon they were brought by the Spanish, but it could have been earlier. I actually don't know the story of how eucalyptus got to California, but my gut would say that the Spanish brought them there. Just as I'm fairly certain they brought the banyans to Florida, like the big banyan trees that come from India. Um, but those are now considered nativized. So 500 years and the tree becomes native? Well, it's not very long, you know. Um, Especially if you're talking trees, right? So the age of trees. So yeah, I don't know. It's a complex discussion. I really think in traditional terms, it has to do with guardianship and stewards of certain land bases, but we're so disconnected from the land that we live on at this point that it's challenging to know what adequate guardianship looks like. But in terms of death and being taught by trees around death, yeah, I mean, I came really close. The oak, I would say, has taught me the most about it, and the oak has taught me about my mortality through experiences with the oak that have shown me the difference in our physical power. Like another way to say that would be the oak has shown me on a few different occasions how much more power it has in its body than I have in my body. And that if it wanted to, it could overpower my body to a point that would kill my body. And that, yeah, the oak has let me know that before, that that to work with the power inside of it requires a lot of humility and also acceptance that you're working with something that's much more powerful than you are. And like a human to an ant, we view ants as inconsequential to us. And if we were to step on one, oh, so be it. You know, um, trees don't look at humans the same way, I don't think, but there's something in the power differential that's there. And trees are strong enough to fry a human being electrically. And they don't go around frying people, obviously. But if you look through, I think, any traditional folk tale cycle in old Europe, you'll find various stories of trees killing people, whether that's um, because somebody cut something down and intervened, or there was a tree that had foul spirits living in it, whatever that is. But it was known at a point that trees needed to be revered and respected because they had enough power in them to intervene in human affairs in a way that could really affect us. Um, so I don't walk around fearing trees or my relationship with the oak. If anything, it just broadened me to awareness of what it means to learn from a teacher.
Reverence, pure reverence. If you had to tell me your greatest lesson from all your diets, and I know it's a hard question because there are many, many things you've learned, but is there one thing that you're like, I am a totally different person because of this particular teaching or, yeah, communication?
I can think of one. Um, I can think of one that it was after a diet with white birch, and I was alone in upstate New York near the Canadian border, and I was out in this wilderness land for about 10 days, and I was by myself, and I wasn't around any people, and it was a really hard diet. She kept sending these torrential monsoons. I would say it was almost like a temperate rainforest where I was, and they were so bad that they kept flooding out my tent, and even the rain flies that I had wouldn't hold up to the deluge, the amount of water that was coming down. So every 2 nights I was getting soaked out, and I wanted to leave, and I didn't leave. I ended up staying. I felt I had it in me to stay through it, and I dried out in the morning in the sun, and then 2 days later it would happen again. I would dry out in the sun, and maybe by like the third time it happened, I stopped caring, and I touched a level of surrender in that diet that I think is still carrying me, if I'm honest. Um, and I remember in ceasing to care if I got rained on through the night, um, a level of depression in my system completely went away. Like something left me in that diet that has been in me, that was in me my whole life to that point. And, um, I just remember I was radically different. I felt incredibly changed. And I remember also that my belief system changed after that. Like I had a huge shift in what I believed about myself, about life, about the nature of reality. And I had everything was in there kind of building for the change, but I had a lot of resistance. I still had a part of me that was going, no, that can't be true. Maybe a strong intellectualism saying, no, yes, you're having all these experiences, but still you need to keep your skepticism. You need to keep your doubt in place. That's kind of was keeping me safe and was connected to the depression, like the
Mm.
inability to really trust my experiences as they were. And all of that left at the same time in that diet. And after that, the learning started getting a lot stronger because I stopped questioning it.
Yeah, surrender is such a powerful movement when we can do it. I have on my altar, I have a word trust, just like trust the process, trust the divine, just give your whole being to what's unfolding. And yeah, I repeat it every day.
Mm.
Brother, let's give people if they're listening to this and they're like, yeah, I want to do a diet, maybe give them where they can find you, and what the process is like, and if there's like sign up for a list and have a call, or however they do it.
Totally, man. Yeah, anybody that's curious to connect, you can find us at sacredtreekeepers.com, also on Instagram. Um, and I'm Jordan Mockingbird. So you can find me there, on Spotify as well. There's some music there if you want to check it out, but sacredtreekeepers.com. And in the upper left-hand corner of the site, you'll see we have all of our upcoming diets there. There's one in Somerset, England at the end of August, and then we have a 1 month long pipe diet that's happening with our global community from September 26th to October 26th. And that's a moon cycle of working with the tobacco pipe. And we'll be kind of talking about some of these concepts of the tobacco law and kind of prayer through the global community with the heart of tobacco and also pipe technique.
Beautiful. And that'd be an online connection, so people
Yeah,
anywhere in the world
everybody
can
will
connect.
connect. Yeah,
Great.
exactly. Virtually.
Great. I'll drop links to all that in the show notes. And yeah, I could talk to you for hours and hours, but I know it's getting late there, and maybe we can have you back on another time, and just touch base about more tree knowledge. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure to connect with you, brother, and hear all the wonderful things you're bringing into this world, and many blessings for your journey and your connection. And I can't believe you're coming to Ojai next year. I'm so stoked. I was like, oh, this guy's in Denmark. I don't know if I'll ever meet him, but that was a real beautiful surprise. And so yeah, look forward to meeting you in person next year.
Likewise, thank you so much for the
Yeah,
invitation, brother. And we'll be in touch about that. That's going to be sometime at the end of May. I actually am talking to the steward of the temple these last couple days, and we're setting the dates. So I'll communicate them when we have them.
great.
And it'll be our third year working at the same spot. So it's one of our becoming one of our outposts in California there.
Good. Right in my backyard. I didn't even know about it.
The web
All right, my
weaves.
brother. Yeah. Many blessings.
Many blessings, Derek. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
See you on the path.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I hope you're doing great. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Blessings to all the trees and the tree spirits. What a beautiful episode. I want to encourage you to check out Jordan's community. Next month, he's holding I think it's a month-long introduction to working with tobacco. And it's a great opportunity to work with the community online, to get to know a pipe, to get to know how to work with tobacco, how to bless with tobacco, how to make prayers with tobacco, something that I do every day and was a great game changer for me when I brought tobacco into my life and started to really pray with it. So yeah, check it out. I think it looks awesome. My new book, Animal Spirit Guides, is dropping this week. If you'd like a free copy, hit the link in the show notes, get on the list. I'll be giving away the Kindle version next week. Very excited to bring that to you finally after 8-9 months of working on it and drafts and all that good stuff. We have a deck of cards also coming out probably next month, I would say end of next month. Very excited about that. I hope everyone is well. I'm sending blessings to everyone for the end of the summer and just feel so grateful to this community, to everyone that listens, to the plants, to the trees, to our guides, to the animals, to our humanity. We have hope. We have to carry this flame of hope for this planet. And I know that if you're listening to this podcast, you are one of the true light bearers, one who is carrying the light. So thank you for doing that. I'm so excited for my next episode, which is coming out soon. It's going to be really good. Just giving you a little peek into that. And wishing everyone a beautiful day. Have a beautiful day. Check out Jordan's work. Do a plant diet. Come to Ojai next year and join me. Hausch, hausch.